Good evening, welcome. Glad to be here with you guys tonight. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Jake Byler, and I have been involved with organizing this meeting for a good number of years. Always look forward to coming out, meeting the people, and learning and sharing with the group. We were just chatting a bit ago. Some of us have been, probably a handful of us in here have been involved with this meeting from day one. Joe Liofsky started the meeting back, I keep forgetting, is it 10 years ago? How many of you guys were a part of it back then? I know a couple of you guys over there. It's probably like 6 or 8 of us in the room that attended back then. So we have all learned a lot since that, and we continue to learn. And this is one of the big ways that we do that. Most of you are aware that these meetings are primarily paid for by sponsors, and our sponsors for 2024 are the same as they were last year with a couple minor changes, one of them being a new sponsor for this year. So we have Ben Yoash, he's a local real estate agent. Chris Good works on his team. Chris is going to share a bit of a market update with us in a bit. Lanka Federal Credit Union, remind me of his name. Nate Rittenhouse was primarily the contact for that. He has transitioned, took a job somewhere else. So Molly is the new contact at Lanka. Jeff Moeller, he is part of our board. He's not here tonight. He does some private lending. Joe Liofsky, as I mentioned, Compass Property Management. He's the one that started this meeting a number of years back. Dave Wolf, Principal Mortgage Group. Dave has spoken here a number of times. Most of you guys have gotten to know him. And Chet Lapp, Providence Abstracting Company. And Chet, you can come on up. Chet is going to tell us a little bit about what he does. Chet is married to my cousin, so I've known Chet for quite a few years. And Chet, I was just thinking about this today. I was thinking about back in the days before I knew there was anything like this to go to. And it's one of those memories that you pull up and you're like, I don't even know why I remember that. But I literally remember the day that Chet called me after I transitioned out of a full-time job, went into real estate full-time, and Chet called me to tell me about this group that meets in Lanchester to talk about real estate. It was the Lanchester meetup group that Alan Remigio ran back then. I literally remember where I was when you called me. Well, I didn't know that type of thing existed.
I thought you told me.
You told me. Anyway, Chet is going to tell us a little bit about what they do at Providence Abstract. Oh, yes, sorry. There it is. And that thing should be on.
Testing.
There you go.
Yeah, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time. Most everybody I talked to tonight was anxious to hear Jake. So Providence Abstracting is only a couple years old. We're licensed in 5 states, as you can see in the graph there. I don't know if can you see it? Can everybody see it? It's kind of got a little bit smaller in the PDF than I wanted, but basically, we are no more, no less than any other title company in Pennsylvania, but we have the Maryland title. That came from starting communities in Maryland, and we really struggle with Maryland title, hence the Abstracting Company was born out of that. And Jake had talked about me sharing more of my story. I'm not feeling it tonight.
It's totally up to you.
I'll do it some other time.
Sure.
I am husband, father of 7 children. But yeah, we're local here. We do mostly Pennsylvania, but we also do a lot of Maryland. I did a couple in Virginia, and those were fun. So if you ever go out of state, like that, we can do the closing at home. We can do seller packages to wherever the sellers may be, and it makes it pretty easy. So with that, thank you for the opportunity to sponsor this group.
Okay, thank you, Chet.
Happy birthday.
What's that?
Jake's birthday is today. Happy
We're already past all of that. I was hoping nobody would find it out, but I think we're going to end up just turning it into a birthday party here shortly. So So when you think about title work and all of that, I mean, Chet just said it. They're no more, no less than most other title companies around. The one way that I was able to use Chet's services in the past year, they live just up on Hill Road, New Holland, not far from here. And I don't know how this stuff all works, but with what you do, you're also able to notarize documents, right? So that has been something that I have been able to use with Chet. I think it was, well, a couple different things where I had something going on just locally, needed somebody to run to notarize some documents. Maybe it was even on a Saturday morning or something, with notice, of course. But so that's something to keep in mind as well. Okay, so Chris Good is going to bring us a little bit of a market update. Chris, you can come on up. He's got a couple of some information for us here. Chris has been doing this frequently for the last, or occasionally, the last year or so. So anxious to see what we can learn from Chris tonight. So it's all yours. I can do that. Yep.
All right. Thanks, Jake. Good evening, everybody. So just, I'm not sure how much of this is actually retained. And like Chet, I agree that people came to hear Jake, not necessarily me. So do a quick rundown of pricing and a few things that happened in 23, and then maybe what we can look forward to this year. So the first quarter of 23, the average sales price was just over $320,000. And you can see each quarter bumped up a little bit, and the fourth quarter dropped down a little bit. I'm not sure if you guys can really see that. The second quarter, the average sales price was $344,000. Third quarter, $352,000. And fourth quarter, $351,000. These numbers can get skewed a little bit if you're, say, selling more $400,000 properties in one quarter than another. So that, just because there's a 9% increase from the first quarter to the fourth quarter doesn't necessarily mean real estate appreciated that much. Then the average days on market was pretty steady throughout the year. The first quarter was the highest number of days on market. This would be from when the property was listed until it went under contract. So it starts at 25 days in the first quarter on the average. The second and third quarter was an average of 17 days. And the fourth quarter was up just a little bit to 18 days average on market. Next slide. This is, I enjoy looking at stats, especially if I have something to compare it to. So I just went back 5 years to compare where we were from there to now. The average sold price last year, or in 23, was $343,000, or just about $344,000. The average sold price in 2018 was $221,000. The average days on market this past year was 19 days. The average days on market was 47 5 years ago. We sold a little over 1,000 units more in 18 than 23. Yeah, 1,300 units more, but the sold volume was up by $300 million compared to 5 years ago. So the total sold volume in 18 was 1.3 billion, and in 2023 it was 1.6 billion, and that's with over 1,300 more units less that were sold that year. Next slide, Jake. So what's happening in 24? I'm definitely not a prophet, but we can maybe look at what has happened in the past and try to guess what might happen in the future based on that. The Federal Reserve expects to cut interest rates about 3 times this year. Nobody knows, how much, but I would think that'll probably, make the market a little more competitive as that happens. The National Association of Realtors, predicts home value or home sales volume to increase by 13.5% nationally. These next 3 are national statistics, or predictions rather. Realtor.com predicts sales volume to only increase by 1%. So I would think in the 13% to 1% range we'll probably fall in somewhere. And Zillow predicts housing prices to hold steady throughout the year of 24. I will say, and you are all aware of this, Lancaster County, or Lancaster and the surrounding county, central PA, really, is kind of in its own economic bubble, right? So we tend to outpace national statistics. My guess is, we've been seeing multiple offers on desirable properties for, several years now. We're starting to see, how should I word this? We're starting to see maybe more offers per property now, and I expect that to even get stronger as rates drop. So if 24 is your year that you're looking to buy, doing it before spring and the rate cuts might not be a bad thing to consider. Then we got one more slide here. So today's Jake's birthday. Will you guys join me in singing happy birthday if I start it? So, all right. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Jake. Happy birthday to you.
Thank you, Chris. I was kind of afraid that would happen at some point. I didn't really know what to do about it, so I figured I'll just let it happen. So anyway, thank you. Thanks for sharing that, Chris. I'm amazed at how you always come up with some good information there. So one quick thing I want to do before I jump into a presentation. I have been wanting to do this for a while, and it just never really fitted into the evening. Most of you guys in the room might not even be aware of this as much, but for those of you watching online, you're probably assuming there was somebody behind those cameras working them as well. So I'd actually like to have John, Mark, and Kendall come up here for a little bit. Make sure the cameras are facing this way. And I just want to recognize you guys, and I want the people on the Facebook Live and the video to know who does the work behind that. So make sure you guys are in the frames there. So appreciate what you guys do. We used to not record the meetings. It's been a couple of years now. People kept asking about it, and it was kind of like, well, it's just a lot easier not to. Then we started doing it on the Facebook Live. I used to try to do it at first, and it was just a burden. I was trying to do this while I'm trying to do everything else. So one meeting I announced that it would be really nice to have somebody to do the lives, and John Mark offered to do that, and he's been doing it faithfully ever since. Kevin Hoover offered to come in and do a higher quality video for YouTube, and his son Kendall is primarily running that now. So appreciate you guys doing that. And I brought a couple of books along, and hopefully you didn't read all of these already, but I would like for you guys to each pick a book out of this stack here and take it with you, and then get back behind your cameras again. Sure. So pick whatever book you want out of there.
Thank you, Jake.
You're very welcome. Got a big hand for these guys. All righty. So there's a lot of things that I would rather do than stand here and talk about myself, but I feel pretty strongly that it is at least somewhat important when someone is in front of the room speaking that you know a little bit about who the person is and what they have done. Not to brag about anything, or not to say that, well, I'm still this little guy compared to so-and-so, which would be a fact, just simply to tell you a little bit about what I've done. So I bought my very first rental property in 2006. Did not do a lot for a couple of years after that, but very first rental property in 2006, working at a shed shop full-time at that time. In 2011, I finally went full-time, started flipping some houses, had a couple rentals at that point, primarily was flipping to generate cash so I could buy more rentals. And over time, that transition, I never had a big team doing that. I had one part-time employee for a while. I don't know the number, probably flipped 30 or something houses over a 6, 8, 10-year period there. And currently am not flipping anymore. Once in a while I'll do a little rehab if something comes along. But I have, this is weird, I don't even know the number, between 40 and 50 rental units. The number isn't really what matters a whole lot to me, but probably around 45 doors. Mostly small multifamily, single family. Lanchester City and New Holland is where almost everything is, not quite. So most of those are, I still self-manage some. Most of them are professionally managed by a property manager. And then I have currently 5 units in the city that I would consider midterm rentals. It's kind of a new term that you probably started hearing about the last number of years, where it's a furnished apartment. These in particular are 1-bedroom units, fully furnished, renting for a month or more, generally to travel nurses, business travelers, that type of thing. 1-bedrooms I'm renting for $1,800 to $2,000 a month with all utilities and everything included. It's been working pretty well. Still trying to figure out if it's actually much better than doing a regular long-term rental. These same units would probably rent for $1,000 to $1,200. So yes, $1,800, $2,000 is quite a bit more, but you're putting furniture in, you're paying all the utilities. You are oftentimes getting a new tenant every 3 months. I've had some extend multiple times, and that's always nice. So still trying to figure out how much more of that I want to do. And then probably the funnest thing that I do, and this also takes the single biggest chunk of my time currently, is managing 2 large Airbnb properties. My brother Jonas and I own one together up in Harrisburg. I primarily manage that one. We bought that one 2 years ago. And then 4 years ago, I bought a property up in Juniata County that has been doing very well as a short-term rental as well during that time. So a lot of what we talk about here, a lot of what I'm going to talk about tonight, I feel like I almost need to give a little bit of a disclaimer, because real estate is what I do, it's what I think about, it's what I talk about, and sometimes it just seems like everybody else should do that as well. And that's not true. It would be insane. It wouldn't work if everybody else would try to do it. So if I say some things that might almost seem like arrogant or offensive or whatever, I apologize in advance, because that's not my intention. It's just how I think, all right? There's many different business owners, businesses, industries represented here, and one is not necessarily better than the other, one is not more important than the other. Real estate just happens to be what I do, and I get pretty excited about it. So, and hopefully you will too at some point tonight, and get some value out of some of the things. I'm still trying to figure out how to do all this stuff, by the way. I realized when I was putting my PowerPoint together, there's a spot here where I can put some notes that I can see, but you can't. So I'm doing some of that. So I did some of that, and that's why I'm going to be circling back here to look at my notes as I'm doing this. So let's talk a little bit about the very basics of real estate investing and the advantages. So a couple of months ago, Chris Good, on one of his market updates, shared a little bit about the 5 ways to profit from real estate. And as I was thinking about this, hopefully this will be valuable for you guys. I think it's important to understand these different metrics. So you can Google this. You might find a little bit different variations of these 5 things, but it's basically these 5 ways that you can profit in real estate. The most obvious one is the cash flow. That is simply the money that you have left over each month after paying all of your expenses. When we talk about cash flow, we generally are talking about positive cash flow. There's also a thing called negative cash flow. I mean, I've had massive negative cash flow, and that's not the idea. So positive cash flow is generally what we mean when we say cash flow. So that's simply that, the money you have left over each month after paying all of your expenses. It's a pretty obvious one. Appreciation. If you saw the slides Chris was flipping through, you saw what the prices did in the last 5 years. That's probably, I can tell you, the first 5 years I was in business, the numbers would have not looked that way. So it won't be the same every 5-year period. But in general, I think it's fair to say that real estate doubles every 20 years. It's a very general rule of thumb. So it's appreciation. You get the value of you get the benefit of the property going up in value. And that will benefit you on pretty much regardless whether you have a loan or not. But if you can leverage that appreciation, it is a lot more powerful. Because now you only have, maybe you buy a property for 20% down, and I thought about going through all these examples, but I don't think I don't have the illustrations, but let's just say if you buy a property for $100,000, you put 20% down, it's $20,000, right? Well, let's say in 5 years it goes up. It says the first year. Let's say it goes up 5%. It's been a lot more than that the last number of years. But if it goes up 5% the first year, your value went from $100,000 to $105,000. If your investment is $20,000, that $5,000 is, what is that? 25%. So that's what we're talking about when we say making money on the appreciation, and especially if you have leverage. Amortization is your principal pay down every month that you're making your loan. You are paying a portion of it towards principal. Principal goes down. It's kind of like a forced savings account. It's not money in your bank, but it's a forced savings account. You're putting money towards your loan every month. That's your principal pay down. Tax benefits, that could be anywhere from a massive benefit to no benefit at all. If you don't have a tax problem, if you're just getting started, it might not be any benefit to you. But as you get more into it, that can be a pretty big benefit. And inflation, profiting on the debt, is simply the idea that you can borrow money today, pay it back in 10, 20, or 30 years from now with money that is much less valuable. You're paying the same amount of dollars back, but the dollars are less valuable. It's a little bit of a harder one to wrap your mind around, but it's a really, really significant thing, especially in the last number of years when we've been borrowing money at 3 and 4%, and the inflation rate in real estate has been 10, 12, 15% if you were in the right spot. That is a big deal. So I just pulled some numbers that can go with these 5 ways. The numbers will vary greatly, depends where you pull them from, depends how you do this, but it is actually realistic that you can make a 46% annual return on an investment. That is assumed that you have debt on the majority of it. Without the debt, it looks completely different. So I see this 46% annual return. I'm like, I'll sign up for that. I'll take one of them. Let's do this, right? So we're going to go back to the very first property that I ever bought, 2004. There's some things I probably did right. There's probably more things I did wrong with this, but I think it's a story that hopefully is worth going through. I had some money saved up. I paid $40,000 for a nice little trailer beside some state game lands. My brothers and I, along with nephews, used it for a hunting cabin for a bunch of years. Had a lot of fun there. A couple of years, probably 5 years ago, I put a newer mobile home on it. We kept going less and less over the years, so eventually, a couple months ago, I actually just sold it. So you can see I paid $40,000. I sold it for $140,000 19 years later, right? Quick numbers. I don't want to bore you with all the details here, but basically, I paid about $37,000 to get the new mobile home there, hookups, all of that. That was a tax-deductible expense after I had sold it. I could deduct that, not during the process. I figured another approximately $13,000 over these 19 years for taxes, and didn't have insurance. I saved money there. Taxes and utilities. So my net sale was $130,000. My net profit on this was $40,000. And if you calculate that over 19 years, that is a 3.8% annual return, also known as pathetic, right? So now the one major factor here is we used this property. It was a lot of fun. We had a lot of fun at this property. So you have to decide how much value you put on that. But think about what that 40,000 would have done. By the way, if you've never played around with the compound interest calculator, you should. We've talked about this. We've talked about that at this meeting multiple times. It's really fun plugging numbers into a compound interest calculator. So if you do that, even if I would have made 10% on, it's $250,000 in 20 years. It's $244,000. At 15%, that 40,000 could have grown into 569,000. I didn't even run it at 46%. So do I regret buying the property? It'd be hard for me to say that I wish I wouldn't have with as much fun as we had there, but knowing what I know today, I would probably make a different decision, and I would probably recommend doing it differently. In my opinion, about the only way that I could have done worse from an investment perspective would have been to have the money sitting in the bank, collecting almost nothing, or if I would have went out and bought liabilities, boat, fancy vehicle, whatever, something that actually cost me money and went down in value. That would have been worse. At least this held its value over the years, and you know, not terrible. So let's go back to what I just shared there and see how I did on this list. What was my cash flow on that property? Zero. Exactly zero every day I owned it. Appreciation, I mean, it was probably 3.8%. That's about what it was. I had no leverage on it, so you're not going to get anywhere near that 25%. I never had a loan on it. So my principal pay down, amortization, that one is zero. Tax benefits were zero, and profiting on the debt was zero, exactly zero. So there you have it. No rental income, negative cash flow every day. Not a lot. The taxes were cheap. It's like $500 a year. Not a lot of expenses, but it's still every month that I owned the property, it cost me a little bit of money. No leverage. Main value was personal use, but we could have also done that with a larger property, rented it out some of the time, been able to use it as a tax deduction, and possibly still enjoyed the property. That's what I would probably do now. So let's try another one. So this one I did buy as a rental property, as an income-producing property. This is my very first one back in 2006. Still look at the property every time I go past. So I bought it for $140,000, put a little bit of work into it. It rented for $895. Taxes and insurance, very reasonable. My payments on it were $900 a month. With my taxes and insurance, principal and interest, I was paying, correct. With all of that, I was paying $1,100 a month, and my rental income was only $895. So you can see I had a couple $100 negative cash flow. Part of that was, that's not always a terrible thing, but the more of that you do, you will find it just works against you. Every property that you have that has negative cash flow, something else has to make up for that cash, right? So I'll still buy a property. I have some properties currently that have negative cash flow. You just want to be aware of that. Anytime you're buying something, the cash flow piece is a pretty big deal. So I sold that in 2012 for $137,000. I don't know exactly what my numbers were on it. This was long before I had QuickBooks, and I could have dug up the numbers if I would have dug deep enough. But my guess is I probably about broke even on the property with the rental income over the years and all of that. So we might look at this and say, with all these ways to profit, where's my profit? I owned it for 6 years, right? And I'm saying you can make 46%. Where's my profit on this thing? So a couple of things that I think are worth looking at. The biggest thing was the market cycle, right? The market cycle in 2006 to 2012 was just very different than it is now. And honestly, if I would have held on to it until now, it would probably be worth $250 today. So market cycle was a big part of it. The negative cash flow, definitely not a positive thing. You know, I I was very uneducated when I bought this property. Probably not a terrible purchase, but based on these numbers, I mean, it's kind of terrible if you break even over 6 years. So, but like I said, if I would have held on to it to today, prices where they are today, it would actually look, it would look pretty good. Another one. So, how many of you are familiar with Mid-South home buyers in Memphis, Tennessee? Good bit of you. So this is not a plug for Mid-South. I bought this one back in 2017 with them. Has worked out well for me. I honestly think you can do better. But if you are an investor that wants to be totally passive and you just want to do something, it's definitely better than doing nothing, in my opinion. I mean, I think it's reasonable. It's not like I'm really cracking this up to be just amazing, because I'd say it's fairly average. I had a really good experience with mine. I still have the same tenant in, so less turnover. I didn't have the expenses with that. But here are my actual numbers on that property. I bought it for, it was $74,000 plus closing costs, $76,000. My rental income over these years was a total of $55,000. They take a 10% management fee, and I've had like 2 or 3 times that they had like a tree limb down and like a couple $100. I've had very little expenses at this property. They're fully renovated before you buy them. Taxes and insurance, all of that. Also, important note on this one, I did not borrow money for this one either. And you might wonder why not, and the answer is just simply because of the fact that, in my opinion, I think it's good as you build a portfolio of rentals. I think it's good to have one here and there that don't have a loan on. So that's the only reason. I never had a loan on this one. There's very few properties that I don't have money borrowed against, but this is one that I don't. So it actually makes the numbers pretty easy. So my annual return on this is, during those years, was 9.5%. I guess that would also equate to a cap rate, be 9.5% cap rate, if I'm not mistaken. And the property value increased by, I think, $30,000 conservatively, which if you factor that in, that's another 6% annual return. So there we're already at 15.5% return without leverage on it. If I would have borrowed 80% of the money, my cash-on-cash returns on this would be really, really good, actually. I mean, they're good anyway, but that's just a real-life example of a property that I bought that did cash flow from day one. The rent on that was $760 a month when I bought it. So I paid $74,000. The rent was $760. For those of you that are familiar with the 1% rule, which is a good rule to at least be aware of, I was a little bit over that 1% rule. And also, the taxes on these things are pretty low compared to around here. So, $800, $900 a month on taxes. It performed well because it cash flowed well. But again, if I would have had a couple of tenant turnovers during this time or something, the numbers could look quite a bit different. And I know of investors that have not had quite as positive an experience as what I've had with this particular property. So we are going to do a little storytelling here in a minute. Something I thought a lot about in the last year or so, of some of the stuff that real estate has taught me. And in my opinion, in addition to these 5 ways of profiting from real estate, I think there's one more, and that's the fact that it's going to give you a lot of problems. A bunch of them. Should have seen me yesterday. I was at this Airbnb up in Harrisburg that I love spending time at, and it was a fun day, but part of that day consisted of me helping my cleaning ladies drag a massive rug out of one of the bedrooms and take it out on the driveway, where I could then proceed to wash and scrape and brush the vomit off of the rug that some guests had left there over the weekend. It was a great group of guests, by the way. It was a kind of a weird experience, but Anyway, that was kind of that's not really the type of problem that I'm talking about, but it's one of them. It's simply the fact that as you become a business owner, a landlord, it applies to more than just real estate investing, business owner of any sort. You're going to get into situations where you've got a problem and you've got to figure it out. And it makes you better at solving problems. It makes you better at handling stress. It's a little contradictory because we should all be looking at ways to avoid problems, right? Like we need to be taking steps to avoid problems. The goal is not to have more problems, right? And in many of these things, like I wouldn't have had to be the one at the property cleaning up yesterday. I could have paid somebody else to do that. And there's a lot of these things where you can pay somebody else to do it, but in my opinion, sometimes it's good to be at least somewhat involved, and usually when you get involved in some of the worst situations, like, yeah, I'll continue. So here's one of the reasons why I think this is significant. Hopefully it'll resonate with you, or at least some of you. So there are people that have never learned to solve problems and they don't know how to handle stress. And those people are not any less valuable as people, but they are less valuable to the marketplace. They're less valuable in society. They're more of a liability. I had a tenant about a year ago that called me, and he had a big problem, and I could sense pretty quickly that I need to meet him face to face so we can talk about this. Went in to Lanchester City, talked to him, and he's telling me about this traumatic experience that he's had. And I'm going to let you hang in for a bit. I'm not going to tell you what it was until I tell you what he's telling me. So this experience that he had caused him to, he had to go to the doctor. He said he had to go, I think he went to the ER. He said the doctor gave him a shot to calm him down. Let me refer back to my notes here. So he said it ruined his holidays. He said, I could have had a heart attack. I could have died. And it was just terrible how much stress this had caused on his life. And what do you think this was? The thing that was causing him this amount of stress, where he's telling me he could have had a heart attack and died, was a notice on his door from the management company that he needs to move out in 60 days. Now, I had some influence in that. We had decided prior that we're going to not renew his lease. But we gave him 60 days. Wouldn't have to give him 60 days, but I said, let's give him 60 days. So anyway, that whatever you want to call that, and I feel bad for the guy, honestly do. I actually helped him move out. I let him borrow my trailer. He used my trailer to haul loads of stuff to a storage unit. I took some stuff for him. But I became more aware, it's like if you never learn how to handle stress and solve problems, I mean, it made this guy's life miserable. So anyway, that's one of the reasons why I think problems can be good. And so I'm going to, so I got a couple guys that are going to share, because I would certainly not want to be the guy up here talking the whole evening by myself. So there's a couple guys that are going to come on up and share some experiences that they've had in solving problems, and we're going to see if we can learn a little bit from them. So you guys that I talked to beforehand, come on up here. There's at least 4 of you guys. And while we're doing this, I expect we're going to have plenty of time. So if somebody else thinks of something while we're doing this where you're like, I got a little something to share that might be worth it, just keep that in your back pocket, and we might do that when we're done here. So Chris, I'm going to let you go first.
All right. Some of you have probably experienced this, but this was a first for me. Monday, 3 weeks ago, Monday evening around 7:30, I got a call from the Harrisburg police saying one of my residents hasn't showed up at work for a couple days. They're at the property and his car is sitting there. And my first thought was like, wow, this is a person that he was always very responsive, so it's out of character for him to not be showing up at work and not responding to calls. So I definitely knew something was up and ran up to Harrisburg that evening, and was expecting the worst when I got there. And I initially told the police that, hey, something's wrong, that he's not responding. You guys go check it out. And they said, well, we're not really allowed to without the owner being here. It's like, oh, great. So yeah, that's when I ended up running up there. I got to the property and I said, I'll lock the door and unlock the door, and you guys go check it out. He's like, no, we can't do that. He's like, we can go right with you, but you have to lead it out. So he got to his door, and I'm usually a relatively light knocker, I think, but I pounded on his door just in case he would be in there. Opened the door. He usually has the door all barred shut. He was a bit of he was a fantastic tenant, bit of an interesting guy. Yeah, it was easy to get in, and his door wasn't barred shut. Bathroom light was on. I was like, guys, you take it from here. I'm stopping right here. And they said, all right, well, you just stand at the door. And they walked back in the apartment and spent about 5 minutes back there. And they said, yep, they found him in the bathtub. He stabbed himself, believe it or not. And it was a mess. And looking back, I have some regrets in how I handled that relationship. But on the positive side, I really came to appreciate what family and friends are in my life. He really had nobody. I'm not going to bore you with the details on this, but I'm executor on his will. And if your landlord's your executor, you don't have many friends. So, yeah, keep your friends.
Wow, that's a really sad twist to that one. Sorry you had to go through that. But my story's a little bit more than a week old. Mine goes back to 2012, just as I was ramping it up, getting started in real estate, and like kind of that stage where every move counted. And I got a property under contract, a bank-owned property in outside of Lanchester. And about a week after I had it under contract, I got a call, and I said, are you aware this property's in a FEMA flood zone? And I don't know if I even knew that such a thing existed, but the property backed up to a bunch of trees. Couldn't see any water from the property. Didn't even know that the creek was back there, but it was the Conestoga Creek back behind the trees. And it's in the 100-year floodplain. And after making some calls, I realized that my profits that I was going to make were probably going to be gone, plus a lot more, just to move this property. This was 2012, just coming out of the recession. Things were heating up, but you had to be attractive property, and a flood zone was not attractive. So, we could have just gave up and said, all right, it's all over. We're going to lose money on this thing, and that's it. But we realized we were just barely in the flood zone. The flood zone rules say that if any part of the structure is in the FEMA flood zone, the whole house, you need to have flood insurance on the property. So we were touching the flood zone with 2 of the deck posts in the back of the property, back of the house. No part of the basement was exposed. 2 of the deck posts, according to the 100-year flood plain, the statistics would say they would be getting their ankles in water like one day out of the next 100 years. So I said, well, we can fix this. We can move some dirt, and they allowed me to do that. They told me I need to pull the dirt from down over the hill, like from the flood zone, because if I bring dirt in, it's going to raise everybody else's flood level. Technically, I guess they're right, but I thought that was interesting. So anyway, we pulled some dirt up over the hill, put plenty on, got it surveyed, and we were out of the flood zone. So that was small problem solving. So now you know that's possible.
So about a year ago, I was selling a property in Columbia, had it under agreement, and I get a call one evening that the fire company's out, that a water pipe burst, that the basement is like full water, they can't go down there. And I'm like, oh dear. So the next couple hours, whatever, were pretty terrifying. I'm like, what on earth is going on? So I get up there and there's like barely any evidence of water in the basement, let alone anywhere else. So it turned out to be not a very big deal, just some small repairs, whatever. So I've been pretty grateful to have somebody like Eli to tap into, and I had asked him, I'd called him many times with my small problems. So he thought another problem that I had over the years was having too many properties and not enough money, which he benefited greatly from that.
So despite all that, I had a problem one day too. And so in 2021, we did a lot of full-blown rehabs on house flips and just had a ton of fun. We had 3 in a row where we just made bucketfuls of money. And we were going to do this again because it was a great plan, and I love great plans. So we had this house, 213 Walnut Street, that we put our heart and soul in this thing. You can look it up. It's really nice. So 213 Walnut Street, we were going to do the same thing, make bucketfuls of money. And we put all new HVAC in, all new plumbing, all new electrical, ripped walls out, opened up the first floor, replaced windows, most of the drywall, put in 2.5 new baths, all new kitchen, had the entire house, just had it professionally, had the original wood floors professionally refinished, exposed brick walls, really nice metal work, and sliding barn doors, just a lot of neat features. Then we had some accent walls that were decked out with wood and whatever else, and put it on the market, I want to say around July or so of 2022, just when interest rates were going up, and I was a bit aggressive on the price, but I was like, it's a good market to be that way. So we started out at 320 or 325-ish, and my realtor thought, well, should probably be under 300,000. I was like, yeah, I hear you, but we'll see where they're at, And back then it took about maybe half a day to a day to sell a house or whatever, and I was like, we'll soon know, and we can always drop the price. And here about 2 weeks went by and had a couple showings. One guy was really on the fence, and he eventually decided he's going to pass on it. So we dropped it to $299.9, I believe, fairly quickly. And I was, just waiting. It's like, they'll be here and they'll be here. And nobody showed up with an offer. And every 2 weeks, I would drop the price, 10 grand. And finally, at 240 something, we had a cash offer, closing 3 weeks, no inspections, and these people were gonna rent it out as an Airbnb. And here we get to within like a week of closing, and they call my agent and say, hey, we're dropping out. Columbia Borough just updated their zoning ordinance, and we can't Airbnb this thing. And so I think they had like a $5,000 deposit, which we were able to keep then, but it was really disappointing because I wanted to sell the house at that point. That was definitely a couple months in, and so they had it pending for a while. So then we can't remember how it went from there on out, but soon after we had another buyer that had it under agreement, and all this time interest rates were going straight up. And this is, I consider Columbia, secondary as compared to Lanchester City. And so that market just was more sensitive to that. It cooled off quite a bit quicker. Then we had another buyer at like 235-ish or whatever. And after a period of time, I don't remember what it was, she canceled the contract. She said, look, I'm not going to buy. And we dug a little deeper. We said, because at this point we were like, why do all these people not want to buy this house? And she's like, well, my daughter told me she's not moving to Columbia School District. She had a high school aged daughter, and she's like, I'm not doing it. So I was like, yeah, I can kind of agree with that. So they left, and I would bellyache at this at our monthly breakfast meetings. I had all the guys in, and I was like, what is wrong with this house? And they were like, yeah, it looks nice, you know. So, yeah, just, but they told me, they said, look, you gotta, you know, if you want to sell the house, you gotta listen to the market. So, as hard as that was to accept, that's what I did. So we kept dropping the price until somebody eventually bought it at $215 with, I think, 7,000 or 8,000 in seller assist, and I lost a couple grand. I was not happy, but hey, there you go. I listened to my friends. You got to listen to the market. So that's about it.
How about a big hand for these guys? So from Eli, that comes after. So I left a message for him yesterday, kind of telling him what I want to do here. And I said, hey, would you mind sharing something about a problem or a challenge that you've had? And he leaves me a message an hour or two later, and he says, Jake, you're going to think this is funny, but I can't really think of any problems. I don't really have any problems. And the reason I say that is because I think I think this is true for Eli and true for some more of us, you're going to run into this kind of stuff, and you kind of forget about it. You kind of just have to let that stuff go. You have to move on. You can't just sit there and dwell on that for the next decade. So anybody else have something you want to share real quick of a challenge that you overcame that you think might be helpful for the group? JD, come on up.
Not something I overcame.
Well, tell us what you got.
And I don't enjoy speaking in front of a crowd.
That's all right. That makes two of us.
So it's been about 3 years ago, I sold a property in Snyder County, a 105-acre hunting property. And the second trip up, we seen there was a house for sale just down the road, so we decided to check it out. It was an estate with about 2 acres. So the hunting property didn't have a cabin. So we checked it out and got in. They were asking $135, needed some work. And so we made them an offer of $115. It was an estate. The executor lived in Philadelphia. And so they took the offer, and about 3 days before settlement, the agent was going to go get his signed lockbox and do a walkthrough for me. And he called and he said, hey, we got a problem. So the oil tank was outside, and we had a cold spell. The oil line gelled. So the heat shut off. Dishwashers on the north side of the house, the water line bust. The water, we figured out, was running for 2 weeks. Nobody lived there. It was an estate. Electric pump just kept pumping. So we went up to check it out. I had boots on, carpet on the main floor. You didn't want to go in without boots on. Water was coming up the walls. Kitchen cabinets were separated from the wall by 1 inch. Every room was saturated. Went down the basement. The ductwork was insulated ductwork. It was laying on the floor. Snapped all the bands. The water went into the heating system, ruined the heating system. So we went back and offered $50,000, and they rejected it. They put it on the market for $90,000, and a flipper bought it. 2 months later, he tried to sell it to my buyer because he got buried in it. He still owns it. He's renting it out. So we were just going to hold it out, but we never did get it. It was a total disaster. They gutted that whole house. There was water running in there for 2 weeks.
Wow. Whew. Thank you, JD. Wow. Anybody else? Going once, going twice? Okay. All righty. So I got a couple I'm going to share that I think could be of some value. I was reminded, as a few of us were here chatting before the meeting, Dave Esch walked in and he's like, any problem with your Airbnbs over New Year's Eve weekend, which some of you know that those tend to be higher impact. Like sometimes it just seems like the worst things happen at the worst time. But for this, it's actually more likely to happen on a weekend, on a holiday weekend, because that's when you have the most people, the most active. So anyway, I'm sure Dave could share some stories there, but I won't be too hard on him. Anyway, a Sunday morning before Christmas, a week and a half ago, I was just about ready to go to church, and I get a message from our Airbnb guests in Harrisburg. It says, hey, there seems to be a leak in the kitchen ceiling, and she sent me a picture of this big wet spot up on the kitchen ceiling. I know that's not all that great. Most times if there's water coming down through, there's, I don't know, it seems like a problem. So I called her, and pretty quickly, based on what she told me, I realized it's actually not a leak from the second floor. Like, here's another thing. It was kind of a lesson for me to not just assume the worst. These particular guests, they were great people. They were a bit more needy than some people, and I knew that. And when this happened, I fully expected it was something with neglecting. I figured it was a second floor bathroom, something overflowing, shower curtain outside. I fully expected it was something that they were doing. Turns out I had somehow gotten moisture into the ductwork. Most of you know that in some heating systems, geothermal is what we have. You have a humidifier in your system so that it actually blows a little bit of moisture into the air so the house doesn't dry out too much. So I still don't know what actually happened that it did that, but we were getting an extremely high amount of moisture. There was a vent right on the wall of the kitchen, so it was blowing out. Literally had a big spot on the ceiling that was wet. The floor was wet. There was a room in the second floor that had a vent underneath the bed. There was so much moisture coming out of there that it was hitting the bed frame, made the wood weak in the bed frame, and part of the bed collapsed. So anyway, myself and a couple of my friends, one of them being Dave Smooker, went up there after church on Sunday afternoon, and we wiped down the moisture, and we fixed the bed with a stack of 2x4s, and we changed all the bedding because it was soaked, it was wet, and ended up with very happy guests and Christmas cookies to eat on the way home. And you know, it's just one of those things where it's like when I get that call or when I get that message on Sunday morning, it's like, you gotta be kidding. Like, this is Christmas Eve, I'm heading out to go to church, and I got water coming through my ceiling. Ended up not being too bad, but I did have to go and take care of it. Could have probably sent somebody else to do it as well, but there was some value in showing up personally for something like that. If Jason King would be here, I would get him to share this, but since he's not, I'm going to tell you an experience that he had that I think is a really good one when it comes to just solving problems. A couple of years ago, he had a sewer line clog. I think he was at a wedding, in the bridal party maybe, just at a wedding out of state when he got the call. Sewer line backed up, sewage backed up in the basement of a rental property. I mean, there's a lot of problems that you can deal with that are not all that fun. Sewer line backing up ranks pretty high into those problems. So he had gotten somebody out, you know, try to snake it out, and finally figured out that I don't know what the right terminology is, but the trap, the vent that you usually have coming up outside in the sidewalk or the yard, somehow kids had gotten a hold of this thing. I don't know if they took the cover off, if the cover was off, but they filled it up with stones, therefore clogging the sewer line. So his contractor's like, I mean, we're going to have to dig it up. We're going to have to dig it up and, you know, replace it. And I mean, that involves replacing sidewalk, and it's like probably $5,000 to $6,000. And he's like, so he ended up the next evening, I think, going out with his, he called me, and I gave him a couple of ideas, suggestions. He goes out the next evening with his shop vac to try to suck these stones up out of there. Didn't work very well. Next day he went, borrowed a commercial grade shop vac, got more of the stones out, still wasn't able to get everything. And here's where just more problem solving comes into play. It's like you think of things in those situations that you wouldn't think of otherwise. You probably wouldn't even think of them if you're a contractor, because if you're a contractor with a backhoe, that's what you're going to think of. So he ended up going to Lowe's, I think, getting a piece of rebar, getting a little hand shovel thingamajig of some sort, tying it to the rebar, and he would stick his rebar down and, like, stone by stone, get these things and just, you know, pull them back up till he had all the stones out. I don't know how much time he spent, probably a good couple hours, but he got these things out. And happily called his contractor back and told him that I actually took care of it. So it's one of those things where you don't, you know, that's not going to happen, you know, to everyone, but it's like when those things happen, you figure it out. And to this day, I'm still amazed at how many problems I get into, big problems, small problems, whatever, that I've never dealt with before. I've been doing this for a little while, and I still get into stuff all the time where it's like, I've never had this happen before. I don't know how to fix this. But you either figure it out, or you pay somebody else how to figure it out, or some combination of both. Another one that ended up, well, I won't tell you how it ended up until I get to that part in the story, but also just about a week and a half ago, got a call from a second floor tenant, Lanchester City, long-term tenant, sweet old lady. Hey, I got water on my kitchen floor. There's a puddle on the kitchen floor. And like I saw it there, and like she's asking her boyfriend, like, did you spill something? And they're like, no. So there's a leak somewhere. So she had wiped it up, and you know, a couple of days later, it's happening again. So that's when she calls me, and I'm like trying to make sure I know, like, when did this start? Because if it's just, you know, that makes a difference. You got to ask those questions, right? So she's like, yeah, 2 days ago was the first she noticed it. You know, it's like right close to the bathroom, and I know there was plumbing right in that bathroom wall. So I'm like, hey, I'm actually coming into the city. I'll stop in, see if we can figure it out for you. Because I do appreciate those calls. If there's a leak, I do want to know about it. So I get in. Sure enough, I could see where some water had been wiped up on the floor. So it was disturbed, so I couldn't tell where it's coming from. The one spot that was obviously the most wet was right at the base of the wall where the bathroom was on the other side. Also happened to be the lowest spot, which also happens to be where water is going to run to anyway. So I went into the bathroom. Everything seemed good there. Plumbing was fine, what I could see. Wall wasn't wet. I'm like, it's possible something's going up through the third floor. So I came back out. And it took me about 5 minutes until I realized her little Tupperware dish that she used to give her cat water had a slow leak in the one corner. So I was sitting there in front of her kitchen sink, just drip, drip. So that was a pretty easy one to solve. She actually felt pretty bad. I just thought it was funny. But we solved that one. And those are the things that are a little easier as an owner-operator. Like if you're a property management company, do you charge for that? How much do you charge for that? Like you don't expect somebody to work for free, right? Unless it's yourself, you kind of do sometimes. All right, I got a couple other things, kind of random things that I think about a good bit, and I hope they are worth sharing. So just turned into 2024, right? Everybody's got their goals, new year. I'm actually curious. I don't think there's anything wrong with doing this. I'm just curious, how many of you have written goals for 2024? I actually do not. I'm just putting my hand up as an example. I think you should. I think it's a good idea. And along with that, I've become more and more aware over time that consistency is better than intensity. I think that quote actually comes from John Maxwell also. And a lot of different ways to say that, but John Maxwell will say the secret of your success is determined by your daily agenda, your daily disciplines, your daily routines, whatever. And it's simply on the principle that the little things that we do every day are usually add up to more than like this big idea or this big goal that we might have. Not that you shouldn't have big goals. They should probably even be bigger than they are. All right, let's just get that straight. We need to think bigger. That is good. And also pay attention to the little daily things. One of the things that, so there's probably people in the room that have done like the 75 hard workouts. Honestly, I'm impressed. That's pretty wild. For those of you that don't know, it is, I don't know exactly, but it's 75 days of a very strict diet, drinking a certain amount of water, multiple workouts per day. It's a pretty rigid 75 days. And to me, that's impressive. If you miss a day of any one of those things, you got to start over. So 75 days, 75 hard is what the workout is called. So I'll just say that, I mean, honestly, I think that's impressive if you can do that. There's probably people in the room that have done it. And I would also say what you do after those 75 days is more important than the 75 days. I mean, 2.5 months is a pretty long time. That takes some consistency, and there is some value to sometimes just hitting something, even if you know you're not going to sustain it for the rest of the year or the rest of your life. There is value in that. That is totally fine. Just trying to bring awareness to the little things. Like if I would stand up here and I would tell you, like, yeah, I got my goals for 2024. I want to drink more water, get more sleep, and keep a gratitude journal. What do you think? I mean, honestly, that's one of the things that could transform your life. It's pretty easy, right? Some of us need to get more sleep. Some of us probably need to get less sleep. So that's kind of a general, it's kind of a general one. But just those random things. It's like those little things that we could do every day. And honestly, I think the gratitude journal or something like that is one of the bigger things where if we get into that daily mindset, to me, it's just a big deal. Another thing, we talked about compounding returns. This actually kind of ties into that. And again, if you've never played around with numbers on a compound calculator, look it up. Investor.gov is one of them. It's pretty fascinating. If you start plugging numbers in, rates of return over certain periods of time, it's pretty astounding. And if you think about that, so I think there's a couple of reasons that we talk about money so much. And one of the reasons is the fact that you can count it. Like Jim Rohn says that his mentor used to say, it's like, well, how are you doing? And Jim says, I don't know. And his mentor would say, well, let's count. Let's count. Let's see how you're doing, right? You can count it. And it's important. Money is important, but it's perhaps not the most important thing. It's pretty important when you don't have any, but all in all, I think it's fair to say that money is not the most important thing that we could be paying attention to. And so while it's not measurable, I feel like this compounding return is something to be aware of in all areas of our life. Maybe it's spiritual, maybe it's physical fitness, maybe whatever it is. The little things that we do every day, I think we would be shocked if we would have any idea what that can turn into in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. And most of the time when we think about that, we think of that in a positive light. The same is true for negative, really. If we're neglecting something that we know that we need to pay attention to, or if we're wasting time with something that we know we shouldn't, those things compounded over time are a big deal. They're not really measurable. But yeah, I mean, the books that you read, I would put in that same category as well. I would actually say most of the people that you look up to, whatever it might be, gurus, role models, whatever, they were probably consistently doing some things in their life long before you ever heard of them. Just some food for thought. So Chris already told us what the market's going to do, the real estate market's going to do next year, so we could skip this part, but we're going to have a little bit of fun with it anyway. It's just another little plug. In case you haven't figured this out by now, when I'm getting ready for a presentation like this, my mind goes all over the place. I'm making notes, I'm pulling stuff together. I'm like, well, I definitely want to share this. And then I spend hours and hours and hours putting it all together. And some of it I decide to not share after all. And some of it I was going to share, but I forgot. So what you're seeing here tonight is what's left of all this stuff. So it's a little bit of random stuff. But where I'm going with this is something that comes from a book that I read this year. And there was a quote in there that I thought was really, really important. And I think the reason it resonated so deeply with me is because I already kind of believed it. I just didn't really know how to put it into words. So I'll get to it eventually. So I'm going to frame this, how do I want to do this? Let's do it this way. So we get together, we always talk about where the market's gone, right? It's important. Chris was sharing the updates, those things of expecting 3 interest rate reductions for next year. Those are good things to know. So we're always getting together, we're like, what do you think it's going to do? Where do you think it's going to go? What do you think interest rates are going to do? Well, so Eli has done some extensive market research. He has thoroughly researched. It's what Eli does, and he remembers it too, by the way. And Eli is fully convinced that the market is either going to go up or go down or stay the same. And it's going to start to happen very soon. Right? So it's kind of lame, I know, but here sometimes you have to overemphasize something to make a point. And here's the thing. It doesn't really matter what it's going to do. Here's what I hope some of you can take away, take a picture, write it down or whatever. Investment success is not about following the right predictions. It's about following the right principles. Doesn't mean you don't look at the predictions. It doesn't mean you don't, strategically do some things. But investment success over a long period of time is not about getting good at following the predictions. It's just my opinion. But as you can tell, it's a pretty strong opinion. All right. What do we got here yet? Here's another one, just kind of a random thing, but I think it's worth considering. Some of you know where the farm is that I grew up on. My brother-in-law, sister, and his family live there now. They had a big barn fire there late summer, I forget when it was, a number of months ago. I got involved in some of the aspect of the planning, the rebuilding, and stuff like that. Most of you know, in Lanchester County, when you have a barn fire, things happen very fast. Things get pulled together. It's quite impressive. And I realized so a lot of those decisions get made fast, anything from how all the decisions. Bottom line is you need to get a lot of contractors in there. You need to get them lined up pretty quickly. And I realized as I'm in a number of those conversations, oftentimes, so the topic went to, okay, well, who's going to schedule the block? Who's going to schedule the mason, right? And oftentimes it went something like this. Like, well, let's get so-and-so. They're really good to work with. After I heard that a number of times, I'm like, that is interesting. We're making these decisions in this circle pretty quickly. And it's like, I'll call so-and-so. They're nice to work with. Didn't talk about their pricing. Didn't talk about anything else. Not that those things aren't important. But over and over, it's like, let's get these guys. They're nice to work with. So that's your bonus. Be someone that people love to work with. And I would trust that you are already, right? But maybe we can make it just a little bit nicer for people, that people really want to work with us, right? I mean, we're always looking for a competitive advantage, and I think that might be one. Another thing, I don't have this on the slides because not for any particular reason, I just didn't. But as I was thinking about this, I'm like, why don't I make a little bit of a list of things that I feel like I did well over the years, and also things that I probably would do differently. And we'll start with the negative, so we can get that out of the way. And this is kind of everyone would always say this. I should have started earlier, started investing earlier. I'm just glad I started when I did, honestly. But if I would have started at 18, 20, like some of you guys are, that's great. And another thing that's kind of, everybody says it, go bigger, faster. I honestly, not all of us are called to massive business, massive portfolios. I don't even know what the definition of massive is, but anyway, so those are some things that I would, are easy to say. Should have probably kept more properties. That's kind of a tough one because we actually talk about this a good bit with a group that we meet with regularly. You know, we see a property that we sold 8, 10, 12 years ago, and you're like, man, I should have kept that thing. But also, those are the properties that were the cash to do what we were doing back in those days. So it's like, yeah, I should have probably kept them, but still had to turn some cash over. The one thing I would definitely do different if I could go back and do it again is get a better handle on my tax and on my accounting situation earlier. It's only been the last couple of years that I feel like I have had a handle on that. And that was a pain point for me for a long time. And I know it is for a lot of investors. We get into this game, we kind of know how to do this and that, but a lot of us don't know how to deal with the tax situation, and it's a big pain point. So I would definitely put more effort into getting that dialed in quicker. And then, kind of go back to my previous slide there. I guess I'm making an assumption, but I don't think I was ever like a bad person to work with. But knowing what I know now and looking back, I wish I would have understood more of the potential impact that we can have on every single person that we work with. Whether it's sellers, whether it's buyers, lenders, you name it. I feel like I've become a lot more aware of that, and hopefully that'll continue. I guess another way of saying that is I would have usually tended to separate business from ministry a lot more. I used to think it's two different things, and my perspective on that has completely changed. I think we're in ministry every single day that we're out there. A couple of things that I feel like I probably, that probably served me well. One of them is pretty obvious with what I've already shared, is just taking action without having all the answers. I was pretty naive when I started out. I mentioned this when Chet came up here, started going to local meetups immediately once I figured out they existed. Guys, I had no idea. When I started investing in real estate, I didn't even know there wasn't as many of these meetups, but I had no clue you could actually go to a room full of people and learn from other people. This one could be taken the wrong way, but I also never hesitated to spend money on education. Books, seminars, stuff like that. Never held back on that. There is also a ditch on the other side, if you will, where sometimes people get into the trap of all about the education. They're spending a lot of money for education and never actually taking any action. That's not good either. And then the last thing I had jotted down for that, I just kind of realized when I was putting this together how big of a deal this actually is. Eli alluded to the fact that we do a monthly breakfast meeting. And that has actually been really a big deal. If you're not part of a group like that, start one with whatever business you're in. We've been meeting for, is it 8 years, 6, 8 years probably? Once a month, there's 5 of us that get together for breakfast. We're usually together for 3 hours. We meet for breakfast at 6 or 6:30. Then we'll go out to somebody's project. It could be a flip project, 213 Walnut Street, Columbia, that Eli was talking about. I saw his brickwork. I saw his hardwood floors. I saw all of that. And it's just, you know, we spend 3 hours together once a month. There was this certain period of time back in the spring of 2020, some of you may remember, some of you may not, where we did phone calls. Probably more than monthly at that time, because that's when it really got necessary to be talking to your peers and so forth. So that's just a couple of things that that I've done that I think were very valuable and served me well. We're going to do a little something here that I have no idea how it's going to work, but we're going to try something. So in order to do this, I'm going to need a certain amount of cooperation and participation from you guys, all right? So everybody put their hand up. I just want to make sure that you can actually all lift your hand. This looks good. So we are going to, you can stay sitting where you are. This is not, you're not in trouble, all right? We're good. you can stay sitting where you are, but we're going to divide the room into what we're going to call side A and side B. Okay? If you're watching the Facebook Live, obviously you can do whatever you want, but I would suggest that you pick a side. I'm talking to the people that are watching online. You guys that are running the lives can actually do whatever you want just because you get to do that if you're running the live. You can do whatever you want. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to show a slide to side A while side B is not looking, all right? And then I'm going to do vice versa, and then we're going to discuss something. So side A, you're getting the first one. Side B, when I tell you, you close your eyes, turn around, whatever. Don't look at what I'm showing on the screen, right? I don't think there's going to be music playing with this, but I'm not positive. So if something starts to make a sound, don't freak out. It's going to be like 30 seconds maybe. So side B, close your eyes, all right? You're not looking. Side A. You're getting this image into your mind, all right? Bear with me just a second here. All right, all heads up. Now side A is going to close their eyes, right? Side A, close your eyes, no peeping. Side B, I want to show you something on the screen. All right, heads back up. What do you see? Who sees an old woman? Hands up high. Who sees an old woman? Who sees a young woman? It's not working quite like I hoped it would, but let's do it again. If you've seen this before, you can play along and act like you don't know what it is. That's fine. So who is pretty sure that you're seeing primarily an old woman's face? Yeah, it's pretty much, it's pretty lopsided. I think we got either all the Democrats on one side or all the Republicans or something, I'm not sure. So who thinks you're pretty sure you're seeing a young woman's face on there? Yeah, definitely got all the Republicans on one side. So most of you have probably seen this before. Let me just go back and most of you are probably seeing it. Some of you are not. So we're going to go back and show you what it actually was, and then I'll explain why I showed that. That is, if I can get my slide thing to do what it's supposed to do. I've seen this more often on a paper, but I found this. Stop it. I just found this video and I thought it would be pretty cool to do it with it. So for those of you that hadn't seen this one, this is the face of the old woman. And then for the other side, that's the face of the young woman. And it's simply, I did it again, there we go. It's simply a demonstration of how certain things shape our perspective. And it's kind of a big deal. A lot of the information that you were taking in tonight, you didn't all hear the same thing when I was talking. You're hearing things and you're seeing things based on your current perspective of something. And that is shaped by experiences. It's shaped by many, many different things. Some of them within our control, some of them totally out of our control. But the fact is, we're all shaped by those experiences, and that becomes the lens through which we see everything that we look at. And probably one of the, I mean, it can be true in so many areas. I mean, it's, we read the Bible through a certain lens, through things that we've been taught, for better or for worse. The political realm, I mean, it's like, how can two different groups possibly be thinking so differently? It's like you're looking at the same picture. Like, how can you possibly think that way? It's a different perspective. Different perspective. And I guess my main point of this is, first of all, to be more open to different people's opinions and learn, try to look at the perspective that they're looking at things from. And yeah, maybe that'll help us to understand some political things. Maybe not, I don't know. So anyway, just in case you didn't all catch that and want to see that one more time. That was the first one. Go ahead there, old lady, blink a little bit. A little different with the video here. There we go. Pretty fascinating demonstration. Ends with the same picture, just a different perspective. Anyway, we're going to wrap it up. We'll do a couple quick questions. If somebody has a question, be happy to take a question or a few before we wrap it up. David?
I don't have a question, but I have back to your $40,000 for the
Mm-hmm.
it came out to about $53 million.
Do you want to split the profit?
How old are you?
42. Yep. Is that good or bad? I think it's great. Somebody over here, Eli.
What property type do you like best?
You're saying like short-term rentals, long-term rentals.
Flips, yeah, whatever.
If I had to, I mean, ever since I got started, my goal has been the positive cash flow. Just something that makes money when I'm not working. Not that I don't like working, but I just like to have more options. Does it work for everyone? Not everybody should do that. It's just what I wanted to do. So rentals over flipping is an easy one for me, although the flipping can be a really good way to get to the rentals. If I would have to make a decision between long-term rentals and short-term rentals, Airbnbs, it would be a tough one. I just really enjoy the short-term rentals, but if I had to pick one, it would have to be long-terms, just because of how easy, how automatic. A lot of the reasons that I like the short-term rentals as much as I do is because it's still your real estate play. All of the things we talked about, all the different ways to make money in real estate still apply. The short-term rental industry, the short-term rental business, in my opinion, is just kind of something stacked on top of that, where it's an opportunity to create some extra cash flow. But it's still a real estate investment. But they're a lot of work. They're a lot of work. So if I had to pick one, it would probably be regular old boring long-term rentals that nobody gets excited about. Wayne? There is. Books. Wayne's asking if there's any favorite books. I mean, I actually do keep a list of that. It's hard to just pick a couple of them, but let me share a few. I mean, on the topic of real estate investing, Rich Dad Poor Dad, Robert Kiyosaki. I think everybody should read it. I don't necessarily agree with all of his concepts. I've actually met Robert, and he is a pretty miserable guy to be around, or at least he was at that point. But I think God gave him an incredible gift of teaching, and he has used that, and a lot of people have benefited from it. So if you haven't read Rich Dad Poor Dad, I would read that. Some of the earlier books that impacted me a lot were a book called The Slight Edge by Jeff Olson. Compound Effect by Darren Hardy is something that's very similar concept. And my list pulled up here. Magic of Thinking Big by David Schwartz was a big one. Everybody should read How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. How many do you want? Yeah, there's probably a lot of people in this room that read a lot more than I do, but I try to get through some books. Anyone else? Questions? Do we know when the Fed rates are expected? The Fed rate drops? Yeah, they don't. All right, well, speaking of books, I wasn't exactly sure how I'm going to do that, but I actually got a couple books here that I want to give away, and they just happen to be two of the ones that I mentioned. So just randomly, since birthdays seems to be one of the topics for tonight, who in here is the closest to either having a birthday or have had a birthday? Come on. We won't sing for you, but when's your birthday? 24th. January 24th? January 6th. What do we got here? Holler it out, guys. December 30th. So we're 4 days away from that one. Anybody closer than December 30th? I think you just won yourself your second book. When's yours? So anybody closer than December 30th or January 6th? The 6th as well? Let's get another book for you. How about I communicate with you later and get you one of these books? You guys, come on up here. Get your book. That's part of the deal. You have to work for it a little bit. First one up here gets to choose. Yeah? I guess I'll choose this one. Okay. Thank you. You're welcome. Got the little guy coming up for this one. This is great. You're going to be reading this pretty soon yourself. Good job, bud. All right. That's enough of showing funny faces and all of that. So, okay, we're going to wrap it up for tonight. Thanks for your time and attention. Hopefully you learned something that you can take away. Thanks for coming out, and we will see you back here next month.